Hello and welcome to yet another tutorial by Davies Media Design. My name is Michael Davies and today I'll be showing you how to create this gaming logo or this eSports logo using GIMP. I'm using GIMP version 2.9.8. This is the most recent version of GIMP. It is considered the unstable development version, quote unquote, because they are working on some bug fixes. But essentially, as of today, which is January 24th, they have sort of locked in all the new features, at least as far as I know, that are going to be included in GIMP 2.10, which means that this is essentially GIMP 2.10 beta, I guess you could call it. Anyway, before I get started on this tutorial, just want to, of course, show you guys my website, daviesmediadesign.com/tutorials. You can see video and text tutorials on here. You can also visit our YouTube channel, youtube.com/daviesmediadesign. And of course, you can go to our Udemy course, udemy.com/gimp-photo-editing, and I will paste that link in the description. We have over 150 students enrolled now and a 4.6 star rating, so thank you for everybody who's enrolled in the course and given us a great review. And you can check out our Twitter page at Davies Media DES, and of course, we're on Facebook as well, facebook.com/daviesmediadesign. So the font I'll be using for today is a free font. It's on 1001fonts.com. It is a sport font called Dagger Square. And I've already downloaded this to my computer. There's an oblique version and there is a regular version. Get both of those. And if you have antivirus software or anything like that, make sure to scan the files before you open them. So once you do download the font for this, these are the fonts right here. There's a lot to this tutorial. There's the lettering, we've rotated this lettering a little bit, we've added a shield, we've added some outlines to everything, and we've created this sort of DPad icon here that's acting as the sort of mascot. I wanted to do a mascot that was pretty easy to do without needing, an hour and a half to create it. There's all sorts of mascot ideas out there. If you just Google eSports logos, gaming logos, you'll see all sorts of stuff out there. But for today, I'm going to do like a DPad sort of icon. And if you have GIMP version 2.8, 2.8.22, something like that, that's going to work as well for this. There's only, I don't know, one or two features that maybe aren't included in GIMP 2.8.22 that we'll go over today, but they aren't necessary. So you can follow along with GIMP 2.8. So I'm going to start by going to File, New, and I want my image size to be 1000 by 1000, and I have the unit set to pixels here. Now it's set to 300 ppi right now. That's pretty standard if you're going to be printing this. So if you're going to be using this logo in a variety of areas, print and web, keep it at 300 ppi. Otherwise, if you're going to be using it purely on the web, you can actually change this to 72 ppi, which is going to reduce the file size, might make it a little faster to work with. And I'm going to do that just for this version, and then I'll click OK. And just so you guys know, I did the original in 300 ppi. So if there's a quality difference there, that's why. So I'm going to start with my text, and I have my esports team named Gamer, but you guys can obviously name your teams whatever you want them to be. So I'm going to type Gamer here using the text tool. I grabbed the text tool, I clicked on the artboard here, or the canvas, and typed Gamer on my keyboard. Then I'm going to select all the lettering here, and I'm going to change the size of this text. I'm going to test out 350 first. And actually, this isn't the font we're going to be using, so I do want to change this font real quick. So to do that, I'm just going to come over here, click on the fonts, and I do want that Dagger font, so I'm going to scroll through to the D's, and these are in alphabetical order, and I'm going to use the oblique font to start. And 350 is a little too large, so I'm going to come over here and type 250, and that's a little better. So now that I have the font size I want, and we'll change the color in a second, I'm going to grab the alignment tool here, and I'm going to click on my Gamer text, and I'm going to align center of target, align middle of target, and that's just going to align our text to the center of the image here. And we'll probably end up aligning this again before the tutorial's over, but we'll just start with that. So I want to show you guys here, in the original composition, the font size of the middle letters, the A, M, and E, are a little smaller than the font sizes of the G and the R on the outside, and that just creates a more dynamic effect there, more dynamic composition. So to achieve that effect, all I did was highlight the text, come over here to my font size, and I changed this to 225. And that just creates a little bit more dynamic text. And you can align this again if you want. Okay, so once I've aligned this again, the next thing I want to do is go to Layer, Transparency, Alpha to Selection. Make sure your text layer is selected here, otherwise that won't work. And then I'm going to come down here, and by the way, my layers, channels, and paths area is on the bottom here, and the strokes and everything are on the top. I'm not really sure why I did that this time around. I think that has to do with this version being a little buggier. Usually this is up towards the top and the brushes are down towards the bottom. So hopefully that doesn't confuse you guys too much. But the next thing I'm going to do is come over here and create a new layer by clicking the Create a New Layer icon. And I'm going to change the name of this layer to Gamer Text, and turn my caps lock off, Gamer Text Outline. And then I'm going to just choose a color tag here, and this is a feature that's only found in the newer versions of GIMP. And then I'll click OK. And I'm going to go ahead and click and drag that layer below the original gamer text layer. Then I'm going to come over to Select, Grow, and I'm going to set this to 30, and I'll click OK. And now you have a large outline around your text. And so the next thing I want to do is change the foreground color here to a red. And I've already got my red selected here, but you can type in this HTML notation number here to get that same red. And I'll click OK. And then I'll grab my bucket fill tool, and I'm going to go ahead and fill in this gamer text area with red. Then I'll go ahead and hit Select None, and that'll deselect that selection area. And now what I want to do is double click on my text layer again, and that'll automatically bring up the text tool. Then I want to highlight the text, and I want to change the color of the text to white. So now that we can see the text with the outline around it, we can change it to that white color we're going to be using in our final version. Now what I want to do is I want to grab my rotation tool, my rotate tool. I have the gamer text layer selected first. We're going to rotate both of these layers, but I'm going to click and drag to rotate this, and I actually want this at a 5-degree angle, so I can come up here and type 5 and hit rotate. And I'm going to do that same thing to this gamer text outline layer. And I'm going to click and drag that, and then I'm just going to go ahead and type 5 again here, and that way we have a nice uniform rotation. And now this is canted up like 5 degrees. It just makes it look more actionable. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use my paths tool to kind of give this a sharper edge. You can see in the original that the G and the R kind of have the edges of the letters kind of pointing out, and in this one they're rounded. And so I'll grab my zoom tool, and I'm going to zoom in on my first area I'll be editing, and I'll make sure I'm on my gamer text outline layer again, and then I'm going to come over here to the paths tool, and now I'm going to draw my path so that I'm going to try to make it as close to the original line as possible, the original outline, and then I also want it to intersect with this line. So I'm going to draw this here. So you click to create a path, sort of like a point on the path, and then you can drag any of the points at any time to sort of adjust where this path is. And once I have that lined up pretty good, I'm going to click on my last path that I drew, and then I'm going to draw another path, and then I'm going to click and drag so that these paths connect. So once I've done that, I'm going to hit Selection from Path, and so now this area becomes a selection. And I'm going to grab my paintbrush tool, and I'm going to go ahead and fill this path area in. You can also go to Edit, Fill with Foreground Color. That might create a little line where the original gamer text outline shape meets the path shape, so you might have to paint that line in with the brush tool again, or you can just grab the brush like I did. Then I'm going to go to Select None, and now you can see it looks like these are just one shape. Then I'm going to grab my path tool again, and I'm going to slide over to the R, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to align this, and I'm going to adjust that in a second. So I'm going to go ahead and adjust these points. Now you can see everything's pretty much aligned there. Then I'm going to go ahead and connect these paths again and hit Selection from Path. Grab my brush tool and fill it in with that same red. Go to Select None, grab my zoom tool, hold the Control key, and that'll zoom out. And now we have the pointed edges here for our outline layer. So the next thing I want to do is draw a shield And so to do that, it's a lot easier if you use the guides, and it's also easier if this is centered. So just one last time, I'm going to grab my alignment tool, click on my layer, and just double check that these are aligned. And it looks like they are. So now the next thing I'm going to do is grab my move tool, and I'm going to click and drag these guides, and you'll watch in the bottom left of my artboard here, my canvas, that you'll see some numbers, and those are actually points on the grid here, and the units are in the same units as my composition, which are pixels. And so I want the first line to be at about 230. So there it is, 230. And then I want my second grid line to be at the same point on the opposite end, and since this is 1000 by 1000 pixels, I want this at about 770. And then I want to create a guide that's in the center. So I'm going to go ahead, and because again this is 1000 by 1000, this guide should be at a 500. And then so I'm going to create two more guides here, and this one is going to be about 200 off of the center line. So I want it at about 300. And then again, I want my last guide 300 off from the center here. I'm sorry, 200 off from the center, so this will be at 700. Okay, so now I want, and these were my vertical guides, now I want horizontal guides, and I'm going to have the same amount, 5 total guides. And these are going to be going 2 above the text here in the outline, and then 3 below. And again, this is to draw the shield. I'm drawing a shield sort of graphic here. And what these guides are doing is they're helping me measure basically where I'm putting the points on the guide for both sides of the gamer text here. And that way I have a nice uniform looking shield. And also down here, these guides are helping me determine the curvature of the path as I draw this shield, and you guys will see what I'm talking about in a second. And I'm just going to leave a little room here because if you'll recall from the original, we have eSports text here, and also want to leave a little room on the top because we do have this DPad graphic here as well. So we want to leave room for all those elements. And so I'm just going to cheat this up a little bit, and I'm just eyeballing these, and I might be adjusting them later as we start drawing, so we'll see. So the next thing I'm going to do is draw the shield using the paths tool. So I'm going to grab my paths tool, and I'm going to put the first path here on the outermost guide and the second vertical guide there, and then I'm going to put the second point here, and the third point I'm going to put in the middle, and then I'm just going to click and drag it just slightly and leave it there. We're going to come back to that, and then I'm going to create another guide right here on the rightmost guide, and then another guide here, and then my last guide I'm going to put a little bit short, and then I'm going to click and drag it the rest of the way. So for this top part, what you can do is you can click and drag the middle of the guide, and that's going to uniformly bring that top edge of the guide up. And then I'm going to come down here to this guide, I'm going to click on this point here, and then I'm going to click and drag that curvature so that it locks right here where the guides intersect. And I'm going to do the same on this side. And what that's going to do is ensure that I have a uniform curvature on my bottom of the shield here. If you want this to be more curved, you can just click and drag it down. And then you can either leave it where it's at or go ahead and click and drag these up like I just did. So once you've done that, go to Selection from Path, and that's going to turn your path area into a selection area. And then come over here and create a new layer, and I'll name this Shield. And this will be our first main shield layer, and I put a red color coding on that layer there. And I'm going to come over here to my bucket fill tool, and you'll see your paths just disappeared, but your selection area is still there, and I still have that red color selected, and so I'm just going to keep that there, and I'm just going to go ahead and fill this in with the same red that we used for this text outline layer. And the next thing I'm going to do is create another new layer, name this Shield Outline 1, because we're going to have multiple shield outlines here. And I'll just put a gray color coding on this, or a color tag. And I want to make sure that this is below my original shield layer. And then I'm going to go to Select, Grow, and I'm going to grow this by 5 pixels. Make sure it's set to pixels here. Click OK. And now what I'm going to do is grab a black color here and then come over here and grab sort of a dark gray color. And then I'm going to grab my gradient tool, and this is going to differ from GIMP 2.8, but you can live edit your gradients here in GIMP 2.9.8. And so I just clicked and dragged to start my gradient here at the top, and then I dragged it to end the gradient down here at the bottom. I can now move this gradient. If I still want to edit it, I can change the angle of it while it's still on the gradient tool. But I like that for now, so I'm going to go ahead and grab the move tool, and that's going to solidify that gradient. And now the next thing I want to do is go to select grow, and I'm going to grow this by 30 pixels and click OK. So once I've done that, I have another outline here. It's 30 pixels out from our last outline we did. What I want to do is come over here, create a new layer, name this shield outline 2, and I'll just put a purple color tag on this, click OK. And I want to drag this shield outline 2 layer so it's below the shield outline 1 layer. And then I'm going to come over here and make sure I have my gradient tool selected, and I'm going to change the foreground color to a blue, and then I'm going to change the background color. I'm going to grab this blue again and just crank down the saturation value here, the S value, and that's going to lighten up that blue a little bit. I don't want it too light, so I'm going to actually increase that a tiny bit, and then I'll click OK. And so again, with our gradient or blend tool selected, I'm going to click at the top here in the center, and I'm going to drag it down to the bottom, and I'm just basically making all my gradients go from the top to bottom just for this tutorial so that it's easy to replicate when we do some of the other layers. You'll see, because we're going to do gradients again for some of this stuff here. So go ahead and select that move tool, and that's going to solidify that gradient. Okay, so once you've done that, what we're going to do, we're going to keep this outline selected here, and we're going to go to select shrink, and what we want to do is sort of reverse everything we just did. So keep in mind we've gone up by 30 pixels and 5 pixels, so if we go down by 35 pixels, that's going to bring us back down to that original shield. But now what we want to do is shrink it again by about 10 pixels and click OK. And this is going to help us create an inner outline here, which is going to add a little bit more depth. So I'm going to create a new layer and name this inner shield outline. And this is our first one and probably our only one. And I'll just color code this to green, color tag. Drag that layer to the top so it's above this red shield layer. And I'm actually going to drag this so that it's above the gamer text outline layer as well. But I still want to make sure that gamer text layer is at the top. So next thing I'm going to do is come over here and grab my foreground color, and I'm going to grab a black here, grab my bucket fill tool and fill this whole shield in with black. And then I'm going to go to select shrink, and I'm going to shrink this by 15 pixels. And then I'm going to hit my delete key, and that's going to delete everything inside of this new selection area we just created. And then I'm going to come over here to our inner shield outline layer, and I'm just going to decrease that opacity until this black line is a little more faded into the background. And you guys can put this at whatever opacity you like. I'll put it at around 15. And I'm going to keep the selection still here. And I'm going to go ahead and grab my rectangle select tool. And now what I want to do is change the mode, the selection mode, to intersect with the current selection. And what that's going to do is when I draw my rectangle here, and I'm just drawing it on that center guide, it is going to keep the selection area to the right half of that entire shield where I have this rectangle tool. So now I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to name this Inner Shield Highlight. And you can put a color tag on it if you want. I'll put yellow. And now I'm going to grab my foreground color here, change it to white, grab my blend tool, and I'm going to change the blend mode here, the gradient to foreground to transparent. And now I'm going to click in the middle, make sure I'm on that inner shield highlight layer. Actually, before I do this, I'm going to select shrink it one last time, and I'm going to shrink it by 10 and click OK. And then I'm just going to drag from the middle to the right, and that's creating a highlight there. Grab your move tool to solidify those gradient changes. Click on the inner shield highlight layer and go ahead and decrease the opacity by clicking and dragging this bar here until you get the amount of opacity you want. And then go to select none. And now we've got our shield created here. So the next thing I need to do, as you guys will see, is I've got all these outlines here, but the outline doesn't continue with the gamer text. It just kind of goes behind it, and that doesn't look great. So what I need to do is go ahead and select my gamer text outline layer here. And I'm just going to increase this so you guys can read these layer names better. So grab my gamer text outline, come up to Layer, Transparency, Alpha to Selection. Then again, I'm going to select Grow this, and I want to grow it by 5 because that was the same amount that we grew that first inner outline. And by the way, you can go to View, Show Guides, and that'll turn those guides off if you don't need them right now, which I'm just going to leave them off for now. So now I'm going to create a new layer and name this Gamer Text Outline Black. And I want to see, so these gamer text outline layer, that layer has a purple color tag, so I'm just going to keep that there. And that's going to make these sort of easier to keep organized. And now what I want to do is come over here to my foreground color, change that to the black we used earlier, and then change the background color to the lighter gray, or I should say the darker gray. And then I'm going to grab my gradient tool and click and drag this gradient, and I'm going to drag it from the top of the shield all the way to the bottom because I want to try to match the gradient that we did earlier. But I just realized that, and this is one of the great things about the live gradient editor here, is I need to change this back to foreground to background RGB. So now we have this set to the same gradient type that we had before. It was just now set to foreground and transparent, so I had to change it back. And make sure your shape is set to linear as well if that's what you want to use. Now grab the Move tool to solidify that gradient, and I'm going to click and drag so that this black layer is below the red layer. And you can see now that it's connected. This outline follows with the previous outline. So now I'm going to go to Select Grow, and I'm going to grow this by 30 and click OK. And this is going to be for that blue outline here. So I'll go ahead and create a new layer, Gamer Text Outline Blue, and we'll see what color we had. We had purple for the color code here. We'll click OK. Now I'm going to grab my foreground color, change it to the darker blue. My background color, change it to the lighter blue that we used earlier. Grab my gradient tool again, and just again I'm going to click and drag from the top all the way to the bottom of the shield, and that way our gradient is pretty much the same as before. Then I'm going to hit my Move tool here, and that's going to solidify that change. And now you just want to drag the gamer text blue outline here down to the shield outline, and that's going to make sure that this blue outline is below all the other stuff and kind of connects with the blue outline we drew earlier. So I'll go to Select None, and now you guys can see this is all connected here, and it looks a lot better, in my opinion. So the next thing I need to do is create that eSports text, and so I'm going to grab my text tool again, and this time we're going to change the text style to just dagger square, and I'm going to click on my composition here, and I'm going to type, I have caps lock on, and so I'm just going to type eSports. I'm going to highlight that text, change it to black, then I'm going to grab my Move tool and go ahead and move this up here. And right now I have this text layer too low right here in my layers panel, so I'm going to click and drag that towards the top, and this is at the very top now. Then I'm going to grab my Align tool here, click on that eSports text, and just make sure that that is center aligned. I don't want that aligned to the center of the page, so I'll hit Control Z. And I'm actually going to move this, grab the Move tool, move this down a little bit. And the next thing I want to do is I'm going to grab my rectangle tool here and change the mode back to just the replace the current selection. And then I'm going to draw a square around this eSports text. But I don't want the square to be too large. So I'm going to shrink this a little bit. You can click and drag the outer edges of the rectangle here to adjust the size of it. Then I'm going to create a new layer, and I'll name this eSports text box. and I'll just color code this with orange. And I'll go ahead and drag this so it's below the eSports text layer. I'll grab my bucket fill tool and I'll change the foreground color to white. And I'm just going to fill this in with the white. And I'll go to select none. And now what I want to do is I want this rectangle here to turn into more of a rhombus. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my shear tool and click on this box here, the eSports text box layer. And I'm going to, you can either click and drag and it'll shear it, or you can type in a value here. So I'm just going to type in 160 and then hit shear. And now you want to grab your move tool and make sure that this is centered behind the eSports text. And once you've done that, if you don't like your layers being sort of outside like this is, you can see the outline of this layer goes outside of the image outline. You can go to layer, layer to image size, and that'll readjust the layer size. So now what I want to do with the eSports text box layer selected is I want to go to layer, transparency, alpha to selection again, and then I'm going to go to select, grow, and I'm going to grow this by 5 pixels. Click OK, and create a new layer, name this eSports text box outline, and we'll color code this with the same color, so we'll go with orange here. Click and drag so it's below the eSports text box layer. Then go ahead and grab your bucket fill tool, change the foreground to, I'm going to go with the dark gray color that we used before and fill that in. Go to select none, and now this box has an outline here. So now what I want to do is duplicate this main gamer text, and so I'm going to go ahead and click my duplicate layer icon and just drag that below the original gamer layer. I'm sorry, I'm going to hit Control Z. I'm going to wait to drag that under. First thing I want to do is grab my move tool and just move this so it's slightly off center here. And after you've clicked and dragged the move tool, you can start to use your arrows like this. And then once I have this slightly off center, I'll go ahead and drag that underneath the original. And then I'm going to drag the opacity down so that this is less prominent here. It just creates a more 3D sort of effect here. Okay, once I've done that, I'm going to create a new layer, and this is going to be our DPad. So I'm going to start with the DPad Circle, and I've already got a green layer here, so let's go with a brown layer. So click OK. And I'm going to move the DPad Circle to the very top, and what I want to do is grab my ellipse select tool here. Make sure the mode here is still set to replace the current selection. Check fixed for the aspect ratio and make sure this is 1:1. If it's not, you can hit 1:1, and that's just going to ensure that we draw a perfect circle. And so now I'm going to go ahead and draw the circle here, and I like having it kind of overlapping a little bit, and so I'm going to put that right there. You can move it up a little bit actually, and make sure you're on your DPad Circle layer. And I'm going to change the background color here to black. I'm just going to make sure this is a true black. There we go. And grab my gradient tool here, or my blend tool, and I'm going to change the shape to radial because this is going to be a circular shape. And then I'm going to try to click on the center as best I can and then drag to the outside, and now that's going to create a nice radial gradient. And I like that, so I'm going to go ahead and click my move tool. Next thing I want to do is go to select, grow this by 5, and then I'm going to create a new layer and name this DPad Circle Outline, and make sure that's brown again. Drag that below the DPad Circle layer, and then I'm going to just keep the lighter gray foreground color, grab my bucket fill tool, and go ahead and fill that in, and then go to select none. And now we have a circle with a nice outline here. So now what I want to do is grab my text tool again, make sure this is still set to dagger square, and I want my text to be a little larger, so I'm going to change the size to 355 before we even type it here. And then click anywhere on your composition and then type the plus. And just make sure that the plus is above the DPad Circle layer, so right now that's the very top. And I'm going to change the color of this plus sign to a lighter gray, And you can either, I've got a preset gray here, or you can just come over here and drag the value here. Just whatever of these settings has the white here, you can drag the bar towards that white and it's going to lighten it up. Click OK. Then I'm going to grab my move tool and go ahead and move that into the center of the circle here. And you can eyeball it, or you can use your guides again. You can just go to View, Show Guides. But I'm going to go ahead and hide those guides again. Now, once we've done that, what we need to do is create the little arrows, which you can see here. And those arrows just give this a little more depth, sort of like how you would see it on a D-pad on a real controller. And so I actually am going to go to View, Show Guides again, and I'm going to use these guides to help me draw a triangle. But I'm just going to create a new layer before I do that and just put DPad Triangle. Set the color tag to brown and click OK. And with my Paths tool selected, I'm going to use my guides to just create some triangles. And I'm also sort of eyeballing this, and you guys can create more evenly spaced guides here, like a more square shaped guide area. Right here, this is more of a small rectangle, but I'm going to go to Selection from Path. Then I'm going to go ahead and fill this in with a black color. And again, make sure you're on your DPad triangle layer. Before you do that, go to Select, None, and now you can grab the Move tool and go ahead and move this triangle so that it is the top facing triangle here on the DPad controller. You can also scale this layer if you want. If it's too big, you can go to Scale Layer, and I have this set to % here. I'm going to scale this to about 80% and click to make sure the height is as well. Click Scale, and then Control Z because I accidentally moved the guide, and I'm going to hide the guides, and then go ahead and click and move that triangle. And after, again, you've moved it with the Move tool, you can then use your arrows on your keyboard to kind of finalize the placement. And now what you need to do is you need to duplicate this DPad triangle layer 3 times, because we're going to make 3 more triangles. And then we're going to grab the Rotate tool here, click on that top layer, and we're going to start with rotating this by -90 degrees, rotate. And that'll give you a left-facing arrow. So you can go ahead and click and drag that up and put it in place there. And again, you can use the you can use the arrows on your keyboard. Then you're going to grab that Rotate tool again, Control Z. Make sure you're on the proper layer here. So click on the layer that hasn't been rotated yet, and this time I'm gonna do 90 degrees. Grab my Move tool one more time and go ahead and put this in place. And it looks like this layer could be adjusted a little bit more to the left here, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then grab one of the layers that hasn't been rotated yet, grab your Rotate tool, click on it, and then this time we're going to do 180 degrees, and that's going to give us a downward facing arrow. So it's over here. And I'm going to use my arrows on my keyboard to get this where I want it. Alright, so once you have all those arrows in place, you can either leave these as separate layers here, or you can right click and merge the layers down. Merge down, merge down, and now they're all on this DPad triangle layer. And I'm also going to decrease the opacity so that these blend a little better. Okay, so there's a couple more things I'm going to do here. I'm going to create an outline around this D-pad, and then I'm also going to create a little glare here on this D-pad circle. So I'm going to start with the glare, create a new layer, name this D-pad, you can name it glare or highlight, and I'll keep this brown. You want this above the other 2 D-pad circle layers, but below the plus sign and the D-pad triangles. So I'm going to grab my Ellipse Select tool. I'm going to uncheck the fixed aspect ratio because this isn't going to be a perfect circle. And then I'm going to click and drag my selection area here. And then I'm just going to adjust it a little bit. And then I'm going to grab my gradient tool, change the color here to white, and then change this to foreground to transparent, and then I'm going to click and drag from the top, and I have this set to radial, so I'm going to change it to linear, and then go ahead and drag that up a little bit, and then grab my move tool to solidify that gradient, go to select none, and that's a little too bright, so I'm going to click on that DPad highlight layer and drag the opacity down. That way it's a little bit more blended in. And now what I want to do is grab my outer DPad Circle outline layer here, go to Layer, Transparency, Alpha to Selection, and I'm going to select, grow this by 5 pixels again, and I'm going to create a new layer, DPad Circle Outline Red, and I'll make this brown again for the color tag. Move that below that DPad Circle Outline layer, and then you can grab your red from in here, grab your bucket tool, so red is my foreground color, and then I want to select grow 30 pixels and create one last layer here, DPad Circle Outline Blue. Click OK. Then I'm going to change my colors here to the blue and the light blue again. Click OK. Grab my gradient tool and go ahead and click from the top and drag it to the bottom. And these gradients might be a little off just because this is actually starting in a different spot. Actually, if you drag it to the to have it start where the shield gradient started right around here, it should line up to be the same. Then go ahead and grab my move tool to solidify that gradient. Select none. And go ahead and move this gradient so that it is below all this other stuff and it is near where all the other blue layers are. All right, so the last thing you can do, I went ahead and exported this. I went to File, Export, and you can come down here to Select File Type by extension and choose the PNG file type here, and that's going to ensure that your image has no background. You hit Export when you're ready to export, and this will pop up and you hit Export again. But one thing I forgot to show you guys, you can actually hide this background layer if you want to save this without a background in the PNG file format. So once you've saved it as a PNG, as I've done before, and this was the original logo I did, it's a little different, go to Edit, Copy Visible, then come back to your composition here, come down to the background layer, and you can go to Edit, Paste. And this is going to paste that as a floating selection layer. Just hit the new layer icon to add that to its own layer. Make sure that layer is selected, and we'll call this Finished Logo. Go to Layer, Scale Layer, and I'm going to increase this by about 300%, so it's 3 times the original size. And you guys can decrease this by less if you want. I'm going to grab my Rotate tool, rotate it a little bit. That's just going to make it look a little more dynamic. And the last thing I'm going to do, click on that Finished Logo layer and decrease the opacity, and that gives you this kind of cool background here, a little bit more dynamic. Alright guys, so I lied, I'm going to show you one more thing. This is, I guess, optional, but if you want to create some like highlight in your text here, I think this looks pretty cool. I've done red here, and then I've also done some blue. And if you do them together, they actually create kind of a cool color, so you can actually do both together if you want. But I'm going to show you how to do that real quick. So I'm going to go ahead and hide these layers, create a new layer, Gamer Outer Highlight. I'll name this Outer Highlight 2 because I've already got a 1. And then I'm going to just put brown as the color tag here. And so here's that layer that I created. Now I'm going to come over to our original gamer layer, and I'm going to go to Layer, Transparency, Alpha to Selection. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my Free Select tool here and make sure the mode is set to Subtract from Current Selection, and I'm going to try to emulate the cant angle of our text here. And as you can see, I'm only drawing on the bottom half of the text, and you can adjust this higher or lower if you want, any of the points here. And then I'm going to grab my move tool, and you'll see that that's erased the bottom half of the selection area here. And the next thing I'm going to do is go to select, shrink, and I'm going to shrink this by 3 pixels. And what that's going to do is allow this to have a border around the selection area we're going to fill in here. So go to Gamer Outer Highlight 2 layer and grab your bucket fill tool, and you can use the red or the blue, whichever you want. I'm going to use the red in this case, and go ahead and fill that area in. And you can keep the selection area, create a new layer, and fill it in again with blue if you want to do a blue layer as well. Otherwise, go to Select None. And as you can see now, we have this cool highlight with the border around it. And I'm going to click on my layer and just decrease the opacity a little bit. And there we go. So make sure to save this file, save. It'll save it as an XCF file with the original layers. You could change the name of the file type up here. Click Save. And now this is saved with the layers, and we also can save it as a PNG if we want, or a JPEG. Alright guys, that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/daviesmediadesign. You can also check us out on our website at daviesmediadesign.com/tutorials. We of course have our Udemy online course at udemy.com/gimp-photo-editing. That is a from beginner to pro photo retoucher photo editing course specifically for GIMP. You can also check us out on Twitter at daviesmediaDES or on Facebook at facebook.com/daviesmediadesign. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.